Cursed be Canaan. In Genesis chapter 9, we find a passage there which has created many debates and many theologies have been formed out of that passage. That is Genesis chapter 9 from verse 20 to verse 25. I will read in your hearing. Here we are told, and Noah began to be a husbandman, and he planted a vineyard. And he drank of the wine and was drunken, and was uncovered within his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and he told his two brethren without. And Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it upon both their shoulders, and went backward, and covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces were backward, and they saw not their father's nakedness. And Noah awoke from his wine, and he knew what his younger son had done unto him. And he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren. Cursed be Canaan. We are going to do an intensive study of this passage so that we can clear the smoke and be able to put to rest some wrong interpretations and theologies that have been formulated out of such a passage. The questions that we'll be asking: what was the sin of Ham? We want to identify the original sin that Ham committed. We also are going to look at the statement, he saw the nakedness of his father, and try to understand what does that mean, and why was Canaan cursed and not Ham? Because from the passage it seems like it's Ham who was the culprit. And finally, are Africans cursed because of Ham, as many people allude to? So we're going to first look at the first question. What was the sin of Ham? You know, many people believe that Ham stripped his father naked and raped him. So they actually believe that there was a homosexual activity between Ham and his father. No wonder why Ham is the one who was cursed. But when you do a microscopic study, especially when you look at verse 21 closely, you find that Ham is not the one who stripped his father naked. And the Bible tells us that it was Noah who uncovered himself. The word that is being used, the Hebrew word galach that is being used there, simply shows that Noah exposed himself. And we know the reason why. He was drunk. He drank from the vineyard, and you know what a drunk person can do. So he uncovered himself. So the uncovering part was Noah's problem. It was no one's problem except him. So it could have happened that while Noah was lying there naked, Ham, when he was passing by, he saw his father who was naked, but he saw him by mistake. Some believe that, Ham actually had sexual relations with his father's wife. They use that phrase, saw the father's nakedness, connecting it with that one that we find in Leviticus, where the Bible, brings this phrase when it is speaking, figuratively about some sexual relations. When it speaks about seeing someone's nakedness, which means that I'm going into bed with that person. So they actually believe that this phrase is actually showing us that Ham had some sexual relations with Noah's wife, because when you see the wife's nakedness, you've actually seen the husband's nakedness. So this is what other people believe in. But we don't need to run before we look at the immediate context, because each and every phrase, even though they might be similar, we also need to use the immediate context. I believe that the immediate context can help us to understand. Each and every phrase must be looked from their own context. So from this context, it is not figurative, it is literal. Because verse 23 is actually telling us that Shem and Japheth, they even had to go backward because they could not see their father was naked. So the word see nakedness that is being used there is used in the literal sense. So actually Ham, he saw his father literally. And as I've said before, when he saw his father was naked, it's not like he deliberately, had to go and spy on his father. It could be that he saw his father by mistake. Some believe that Ham actually castrated his father because he did not want the father to bear more children so that they can, share the inheritance. So they believe that because of that bitterness, Ham had to castrate his father. But that one also, it poses a lot of questions because it does not have any biblical or historical support. Some believe that it was actually not Ham, but it was Canaan. They believe it was Canaan who saw his father's nakedness, not Ham. And they use verse 24 of this passage that we read. So when they look at verse 24, they actually use that phrase, he saw what his younger son has done. They believe it refers to Ham's younger son, who is Canaan. But when you do proper Hebrew grammar and the syntax, they do not agree. Proper usage of the Hebrew grammar and the syntax will tell you that the younger son that is being referred to there is Ham. It is Ham. Ham was actually the youngest son of Noah. So he is the one who actually did this terrible sin. And if you also check here, you find that there is also another question that people asked, and they asked, but why the father's nakedness? What was the big deal about seeing someone who's naked? But it's also important for us to go back to the ancient Near East, because in the ancient Near East, it was a taboo to see the nakedness of an elder. Where's your father or your parents? It was a taboo. If you do that, it was considered, one of the greatest, insult to your parents. So in that context, it makes sense that when Ham saw the father's nakedness and the father knew that the son had seen his nakedness, he had to be beaten. So we'll see that from this passage, Noah actually pronounced the case as an invocation to God, as a request for justice. As I've told you about the ancient Near East. So Noah had to do it for justice reasons, because his son has seen his nakedness. But I want us also to be to clarify something here. When you look at this passage, I believe from the very passage that Ham's real problem or real sin was not actually in seeing his father was naked, because as I've said, he might have seen his father by mistake. But the real sin that Ham committed was that of not taking an action when he saw his father was naked. Instead of doing the best that he can to cover his father's nakedness so that it wouldn't even last for a second, he had to go and tell the other people. That one was actually an insult, a kind of a disrespect to his father. How can you go and tell the other people that the father is naked? You also want them to come and see so that he can be more exposed. So this is where the challenge was. So Ham's real problem or sin was that one of going and telling other people that his father was naked, as if he could not have done something on his own. And it really shows, because when you study now historically, you find that Ham also had a certain kind of a character that was different from his brethren. So it could be that he was actually mocking his father by going to tell the other brethren. He was actually mocking his father. So because of that, the father was bitter, and the father had to call for justice when he brought that case upon him. Then the other question that people now ask, why was Canaan cursed and not Ham? Because we know that from the whole passage, it is all Ham who did the thing. Now, I want you to also take note that in the penultimate, children usually suffer for their parents' sins. And this one is very common. It was common in the past. It is also even common today. In the penultimate, children usually, meet with their fathers in cases, and sometimes it doesn't end well. What I'm trying to say here is that if the fathers fail to teach their children. If they fail to do what is good in the eyes of the Lord, they are creating a lineage of defiance, of rebellion against God, just like what Cain did. Cain thought he was the only one who was rebellious, but look at what happened. His generation that came after him, they just followed after their father's footsteps. And when the flood came, it was a curse that was brought upon them because of their father Cain. So it is the same thing that is happening here. Ham, because of his character, because of his behavior, he did not know that he was planting a seed of rebellion in his children. That's why his children grew up to be idolaters. All of his children, they grew up to worship idols because they took it from their father. But you would notice that of all the 4 sons that he had, it seems like Canaan was the one who was actually who imitated his father to the verity. Because you see by how the Canaanites were more evil. You know, the Canaanites became the most evil of all because of what they took from their father, who is Ham. So because of Ham's sin and character, it is passed to his sons. But Cain seemed to surpass them all. And I've said, you see by the abandoned wickedness, which proved that this curse was actually warranted. The curse wasn't intended to fix the fate of Canaan, as many people believe, predestination. But Ham's son became the object of the curse, thus implying similarity of character with his father. So, according to the passage, Noah's curse was actually a prophecy. It was not pronounced as a resentment, no. Just like, Jacob's sons. Remember when Jacob was also, giving the blessings to his sons. He was just, giving the prophecy. He foresaw what was going to happen to them. So when he's telling them that this one is not going to prosper, this one, the scepter is not going to depart, he was just actually giving what was going to happen to them. It's not like he was actually commanding the events to happen. So this is the exact thing that is happening with Noah here. When Noah is pronouncing the curse upon Canaan, he was not giving it out of resentment, but he was just giving a prophecy. God made him to see the future. Because actually during that time, Canaan was living, and he saw the characters of the grandsons, and he saw that Canaan was actually going to be a problem, and he indeed became a problem. So it was like a prophecy that he was giving. So the prophecy does not fix Canaan, in particular on Ham's son in general, in the bones of the iron destiny. It is merely a prediction of what God foresaw and announced through Noah. Take note, presumably Canaan already walked in the sin of his father. The sin became such a strong feature, in the national character of Canaan descendants, that God later on ordered their destruction. We know what happened later on to the Canaanites. They were utterly destroyed because of the grave sins that they had committed. So when the curse is coming, when he says, "Cursed be Canaan," it's not like, he was resenting what his son Ham had done, but he was now actually giving the prophecy of what was going to happen. In other words, he was actually showing Ham that your behavior, your character is going to be a seed that will be planted on one of your sons, and they are going to be cursed and they are going to suffer because of what you have done. You think that what you are doing it for yourself, you are doing it for your own good, but you don't know that you are actually creating a negative posterity for your future generations. And the last question that people asked is, what's the relationship between Africans, and the curse that came from Noah? So some Africans, they believe that Africa, was enslaved. Africa, was colonized because we are suffering from the curse that was announced by Noah. So they believe that because Africans, they come from Ham, so that curse is coming upon us. But remember, Ham had 4 sons. He had Mizraim, he had Cush, he had Put, and he also had Canaan. And the curse was given to Canaan. It was not given to the other 3 sons. And when you do a proper genealogy of ancestry, you would find that we Africans actually do not come from Canaan. Africans, they come from Cush, they come from Mizraim. So the one who was cursed was Canaan. It was not us. Even the geographical structure, Canaan remained mostly in the southern parts of Asia, but it was Cush and Mizraim who crossed the sea and came to Africa. So Africans are not cursed according to the Bible. There is no curse that came to us. When that curse was announced to Ham, it was not coming to us Africans. And also, according to the modern scholarship, the word Ham that you see there, it is not related to the Hebrew or any Semitic word that meaning black or dark, as many people, allude to. So this was a doctrine that was fabricated by people. We don't know why they fabricated it. We are not sure of the reasons, but that is not true. If at any point we have been cursed as Africans, that curse is not coming as a result of the announcement that came from Noah. No, it is our own making. Africans in the Bible, we have not received any curse. The curse was to the Canaanites, and the Canaanites were later on destroyed because of their grave sins that they committed. So as an African, if I have gotten any curse, as I've said, it's not associated with harm. I am actually responsible for whatever curse that comes upon me. So cursed be Canaan. As an African, don't think and try to marginalize yourself because you think that we cannot do, we have nothing, we can't do anything about it. We have already been cursed. There is no biblical reference of Africans being cursed. It was Canaan who was actually cursed. And remember that curse was warranted. Canaan brought the curse upon himself because of his sinfulness, even though he took that sinfulness from his father. So I want to conclude by saying our behaviors today can actually be of a negative impact or a negative externality to the future generations. So when we are living today, live knowing that you are actually creating a generation, and ask yourself if that generation is going to be prosperous or it is going to be annihilated because of the sins that we commit. Cursed be Canaan. Thank you.